I feel this is the beginning of a completely different era in terms of the science and how you ask the question, how you interact.
He took the system only 2 days for a problem that he was bugging José for many years.
The rise of AI co-scientists is transforming the way research is conducted across fields from medicine to materials science. These AI-driven systems are not just tools for automation, but are active collaborators, assisting researchers in hypothesis generation, data analysis, and even experimental design. To further explore this, we are joined by Professor José Penadés and Dr. Tiago Costa from Imperial College London about their recent collaboration with Google and its new AI co-scientist, a multi-agent AI system built with Gemini 2.0.
We don't really know to what extent this system can provide absolutely new, hypotheses from a completely new area of research. Okay, we are working with Google on that.
Now, I am delighted to be joined in our DC studio by my colleagues Layla Rizvi and Stephen Horn. Welcome to you both.
Thanks, Audrey. Isn't it great to be here?
It is. It's great to finally be doing this face-to-face. I love collaborating. And speaking of collaborating, your thoughts on AI co-scientists?
I'm very excited by this, right? I mean, I'd love one of these little research groups myself. I could have it sitting in the corner of my office. Anytime I had a problem, anything I needed sorting out for the business, I could just press a button and woof, off it goes. So I think it's very exciting. But Leila, look, I have a couple of questions for you. One is, the first of my questions is, what's the difference, right, between, because it crunches data, but what's the difference between these co-scientists and an AI bot that we're used to? And my second question is, if there's so much difference, why am I needed, right? Why?
Yeah, so I think an AI bot or an AI chat bot, it being a large language model, is essentially predictive. It's just trying to predict the next word, and its main priority is conversation. Whereas an AI co-scientist firstly has all of the knowledge of the scientific problem you're trying to decipher fed into it, and it's operating in a different way in terms of pattern recognition is what I imagine it's doing, and that's kind of how it differs. I'm quite skeptical about the AI co-scientist.
Good.
Coming from a scientific background myself, I think there are huge merits in it because, firstly, apparently science has been getting less disruptive over time. There's less disruptive papers, there's less disruptive patents. I think there was a Nature paper written by Michael Park and colleagues which kind of tracked this, that we're not innovating as much as we used to. And one of the reasons for this is that there's just too much knowledge. That as you have more knowledge, more scientific discovery, your domains of expertise get more siloed and innovation occurs kind of between disciplines. So AI, I think, could help with that because there's no limit to the knowledge it can accumulate. It can be a PhD in biochemistry, in physics, etc. But the reason I'm skeptical is because fundamentally our knowledge at any one point is wrong. We don't know it all. So if you're using something which is trained on our previous knowledge and our data, is it going to go in the right direction? I think innovation comes from conjecture. My personal
but I think these research assistants can do that, can't they?
No, well, so my hypothetical question, I know some people hate hypothetical questions. If we had AI as we do today, but it only had our scientific knowledge in the 1950s, so let's say it thought lobotomy was the gold standard for treating mental health issues, would it be able to get us to where we are today?
And I think would the machine learning, programs that we have in place today be able to sift through all of that old data and make sure not to bring it into the conversation?
But it would. I think the scientific processes that you come up with new ideas which aren't necessarily based on past data, and then you test those new ideas against the data that you collect, rather than trying to come up with new ideas from past data. Because I think that's how AI operates.
But when we had Luke on, we were talking about AlphaFold. This was new drug discovery, right? By crunching the data.
Yeah, I think it was different combinations and permutations of proteins, which I think it can function in that respect. So I think it is useful, again, as an asset to a scientist in helping crunch these huge numbers. And I think it's more doing the labor rather than up with revolutionary ideas. So I think from my perspective, I don't think it's going to come up with Einstein's theory of relativity by itself, which he did just sitting in a patent office kind of coming up with ideas. Whereas I think, yes, it will help come up with 1,000,001 different protein combinations which might work, so you don't have to sit down and do the math. That's kind of how I see it, but we'll see.
That gives us something to ask our guests about, Audrey.
Right. Experts are paying attention to this, but they're doing so with caution. Researchers have tested it, and while they are impressed, they see it as a promising tool, but they still think human oversight is key. So while we're not handing over any Nobel Prizes to AI just yet, we are definitely heading in a new direction. Let's speak now to Professor José Penadés and Dr. Tiago Costa from Imperial College London about their recent collaboration with Google and its new AI co-scientist. Thanks to you both for your time today. Appreciate it.
A pleasure.
Thank you for having us.
So I would like to get started with you, Professor Penadés. And at Imperial, you approached the AI co-scientist laterally by asking it a question that you already knew the answer to from a previous laboratory experiment. Why did you take this approach, and what did it reveal about AI's ability to generate scientifically sound hypotheses?
Tiago started working with Google and the co-scientists first. He asked the system a question that they didn't know the answers, and then we realized that knowing if testing if the hypotheses that the system provides were right or not, it took a lot of time, because at the end, the co-scientists only provide hypotheses that need to be verified in the lab. So then we realized that maybe we could do something in the opposite way. Tiago and myself, we were working in understanding how some viruses spread DNA between bacteria. And we already knew the answer, a pretty cool mechanism. So we approached the co-scientists saying, okay, this is the hypothesis we have. We already know the answer. Nobody knows it because we didn't publish, we didn't put up preprint. And the co-scientists came with several hypotheses. And the top one was almost recapitulating the findings we had in our paper.
So Tiago, how did the system's reasoning differ from the human scientists' reasoning?
Well, I think the system doesn't take a biased approach. Okay, it does not. We as a human, we tend to build up on a selected knowledge, and this selected knowledge comes from the papers that we read, the experiments that we ran in the lab. What the system seems to be doing is to take a completely unbiased approach and looks through the literature and picks up the most important elements that are important to address the scientific question. It requires some iterative work, so we can provide feedback to the system, and the system can focus on a particular aspect. So if we see that is looking more tangential to one aspect than to the real core of the question. So there is some plasticity within the system that could be be driven by us.
That's very, very interesting, because one of the things that we're often told is that AI has biases that are based on human biases of who's put the data in or who's done the program. But if I've understood what you were saying, you said that it's interesting that the AI doesn't show bias.
No, that's correct. It does. From our experience, it does not show any bias, and he even was able to come up with novel hypotheses that José's lab have been working in this particular topic for many years, and the system were able to come up with scientific hypotheses that José was never thought about.
Now, I'm going to jump in and I'm going to really annoy my co-host here, whose questions are carefully thought out, but I can't resist it, I'm afraid, because it's such an interesting answer. How can you explain the fact that the machine can come up with original hypotheses? Because very often people say that, well, all AI can do is predict based on data that it's been given. and therefore can't come up with anything original. But from what you're saying, it does. So how can you explain that?
We have been thinking a lot about that, and it has been a lot of quite frustrating that you spend so many years trying to find something that in a few days, the scientists provide. But what Tiago said, I agree completely. So the big problem we had is that we had a lot of knowledge, and when you have a lot of knowledge, so I always was very proud of myself. I never said these things because I think it's against what people will expect. I don't read too much. Okay, so I don't have a big knowledge about things.
Me neither.
I find that hard to believe.
No. I'm talking about my specific area of research. Okay, and because of that, I think sometimes when we analyze data in the past, we were not biased, but what other people thought or published before. Okay, so we just interpret the results in that way. Okay, and in this case, we were absolutely biased because we have been working with this system for more than 25 years. And we already assumed that things were happening in one specific way. Okay. So basically what this system did is that I don't have the knowledge you have. It doesn't matter. But based on what it's published, you should test this hypothesis. Okay. And I think the system paid me with the same coin or whatever that I have been using for many years, not having too much knowledge because the system didn't explain everything, but went to the end. Okay. So basically, I can explain these things in a very easy way. What we discover is a mechanism by which what we call satellites can go to different species. And that's because they have the ability to take different tails, what we call tails, And we knew for many years that the tails is what we determine where the DNA will go, okay? So if I said to you, to go to a house, you need a key, okay? And I said, I can go to 5 houses. What you will say to me? You have 5 keys. We have a lot of bias before, and the answer that was obvious there, if you go to a house, it's because you have a key. You have to 5 houses, it's because you can have 5 keys. We didn't see that, and it's very frustrating. But this is what Tiago said. We were absolutely biased for many years of research, thinking that things happen in a specific way and you cannot have 2 keys and you can this and that, and the system just ignore all this previous knowledge. Okay, that it's right, but not always.
So Dr. Penadés, you said that it's quite frustrating that it got to the same hypothesis that your team had been researching for years quite quickly, right? How significant is this in terms of just accelerating discovery, and how do you think things like AI co-scientists are going to impact laboratory science fundamentally?
When I say frustrating, in fact, we were very excited. This is because, I think I said that I was 50% excited. I cannot say that I was scared, because, not scared in the way that I was scared. I was in the way that this is changing the way we do science. Because now every single hypothesis or every single, area you work, you will challenge the system to see what the system says, okay? At the end, we need to remember still that we need to do the experiment to test or to confirm the hypothesis. But definitely, the quality of the hypothesis that the co-scientists provide, it's worth thinking. Okay, so this makes sense, and it has been a very nice exercise. We put out on a paper explaining, because there were 5 different hypotheses, okay, and all of them made a lot of sense, okay. And even before, and probably Tiago can talk, as I said, we start working with the co-scientists because Tiago started working with the co-scientists in a completely unrelated topic, and the hypotheses that the co-scientists provide, he thought were a very high level. So definitely, these type of tools will change the way we approach, we do science.
With AI being able to come up with these good hypotheses, as you say, what are the obstacles with translating those into breakthroughs?
Well, if they are correct, there won't be obstacles. It's just the pace of the discovery will be accelerating. We tend to fail the vast majority of the experiments that we run in the lab. Okay, because maybe because we are posing the wrong question, we have been biased towards one path of experimental setup. what the system does, it puts you, what we think, or from our experience, it puts us in the correct experimental path right from the beginning.
Right.
Okay. So basically, if you think about 100 meters race, it basically puts you starting at meter 20 or 30. Okay. So you reach to the finish line much quicker. Okay. In our case, was way quicker. He took the system only 2 days for a problem that it was bugging José for many years. Okay. So it was truly remarkable.
I think something we also mentioned in this kind of our interactions with the co-scientists is like this creates also some kind of, I don't know, we call problems, but now if many people can use the same system, asking kind of the same question, how you now discriminate between scientists. In the past, it's always, so this is something that needs to be addressed. Okay. And there is another thing that we don't really know. In our interaction, all the knowledge was there. We were biased, but the previous knowledge was there. We don't really know to what extent this system can provide absolutely new, hypotheses from a completely new area of research. Okay, we are working with Google on that, so the completely new areas of research and trying to see things to test the co-scientists. But this is something that so far, at least for me, it's unclear. Okay, when all the pieces are there, definitely that putting dots together will be amazing.
Yeah. So just on that note, was the AI co-scientist using the knowledge specifically from your discipline as opposed to also pulling from other disciplines? Because that's something which I find quite interesting, that a lot of innovation happens at the intersection of disciplines. You know, you got MRI from the application of physics to healthcare. So is that where we're heading, or is it still quite narrow and siloed?
It was very specific. He was answering the question very specifically. I did. It was not pulling knowledge from very far research areas. However, it was pulling from a different area within what we call a horizontal gene transfer. Okay, there are several mechanisms of horizontal gene transfer. And the one that we have been working in José was one particular mechanism, which is called transduction. Okay, but one of the hypotheses that he pulled, which was not the top ranked, but we think it's very valid, that we have some preliminary data that seems to be pointing as valid as good, was bringing a concept from a different mechanism of horizontal gene transfer, trying to explain these particular observations that we made in the lab.
I think so. For the question, if I understood, because I understood the question in a different way, maybe I'm wrong. I think the co-scientists use all published papers. It doesn't matter what's the topic.
Okay.
For your suggestion, I think that's absolutely right. I think the advantage that co-scientists might have over people is that, first of all, can analyze more papers, all the published papers, data sets, or whatever, and probably papers that I will never check for other disciplines that maybe in some specific papers, they have some value, some information that can be important. Okay. So I think my understanding, I don't know if that's right, is that they basically have access to all published papers. I think in PubMed, what we call is the public library for, papers that have been peer reviewed.
Sure. I think you both answered my question from two different angles, so that's great.
Yeah. I would like to ask you, Dr. Costa, about the role that you still think human intuition and expertise still plays in refining AI-generated hypotheses. And do you have certain areas where you feel like AI still falls short?
Well, we haven't tried different areas. He has been always within this the theme of horizontal gene transfer mechanism, and so the humans will still be needed. Okay, so
Thank goodness.
yeah, so the system what provides you is with different hypotheses. Okay, it's important that you pose the right question, that the system is prompt with the right question. The system, from our experience, won't answer correctly, please give me the cure for cancer. So this would be too broad, okay? But if you pose the right question, specific, and you introduce the question in a correct way, the outputs are very good in our experience. Okay, so that said, you end up with several hypotheses that you need to test, and this is why the humans are also still important. Okay, so the outputs of the co-scientists cannot be taken as universal truth and the final answer for the question that you pose. Okay. You still need to follow the scientific method. You still have to go to the lab, run the experiments that actually the co-scientists suggest. So they make some suggestion of experimental work, if you like. And you still have to analyze the data, interpret the data, and make conclusions. And if the conclusions match or answer the initial question convincingly, and if it's data driven, the conclusions, then it's perfect.
And I know Stephen touched upon how how can this AI co-scientist come up with novel hypotheses? And I think this is something that we discussed earlier as well, that there's scientists like David Deutsch who argue that the real source of novel theories isn't from data or observation, but human conjecture, right? And so does that fundamentally limit the AI co-scientist's ability to come up with really revolutionary hypotheses? As in, can it just direct us slightly in the right direction, but can it be transformative?
That's something that I don't think we know, but I will not agree. In my case, the biggest discoveries came from data observation and trying to understand the result based on what people thought in the past, that we realized that the results didn't match with the previous hypothesis, and then we start working with something. As I said before, you might have thousands of different papers providing very small things that no single person will have the ability to have all this information in mind. Okay, so definitely providing new hypotheses based on published results that other people have published but we didn't realize at the time, that will work absolutely for sure. Okay, and we have evidences for that. So we have been challenging the system with questions that have been on, people asking for more than 70 years, and so far the system provides hypotheses that look very promising. Okay, and you see the rationale all was there, but they connected the dots. For things that are absolutely novel, okay, that this is people that can sometimes provide changes. I don't know. Okay, I hope it's no. The answer is no for that. Okay, but definitely I would say that for the majority of the science we do in the lab, that many times is just putting things together, interacting, wherever, that will definitely, the impression we have is that it will be an extremely powerful tool.
So I just want to dig a little bit deeper on the kind of role for humans in all this. And so from what I understood you saying is that the computer has access to all published material, and then you ask it a question, and when you ask it a question, it comes up with the hypothesis that you then have to test in the lab. So it seems to me that the human role is twofold in that. One is asking the question, as you said, and the second of all is doing the experiments to physically prove. Now, can you see, what I'm trying to get at here is, why can computers not do both of those things? Now, so the second one, the physical experimental, perhaps clearly can't do now, but one could perhaps see the use of robots in the future to be able to do that. And do you think, I guess my question is, do you think posing the question is what's uniquely human? Is that what makes us human, the ability to pose a question? And you think that you can't see AI being able to do that?
Again, there are two different questions here, okay, in my mind. So there will be obvious questions that every single person, and I'm pretty sure co-scientists or the systems will do, Okay, as soon as let's say a stupid question, how can I make a vaccine for HIV? Okay, would say any single person, any co-scientist or whatever will do this type of questions. Okay, but definitely there will be questions of people that found something interesting that nobody thought that was interesting at the time or whatever. That will be human capacity, at least in the way I see. Again, during the research, you start testing an hypothesis, and sometimes you have results that you cannot explain. Okay,
Right.
and this is when some people have the ability, I say, to see in the dark. Okay,
Right.
there are people that see some results and say, okay, something here doesn't feel well, or whatever. So definitely humans can do that. I'm not absolutely convinced right now that the co-scientists can provide a completely new hypothesis from scratch. This is something that we need to know in the future.
And I guess the last question for me is: can you see a role from the co-scientist in peer review for articles?
I think, Jose, you have an.
Yes,
you pose
absolutely,
that.
yes.
You pose that question.
Yes, absolutely, yes. Okay. In fact, I think there are some agencies already that they have been trying for years to use similar systems to make the first screening. In fact, when we submitted the papers to some journals, and we were already talking to what extent these kind of systems will help journals as well during the peer review, because obviously the system can talk about the novelty. From my side, the feeling I have, I was very excited to be part of this because I feel this is the beginning of a completely different era in terms of the science and how you ask the question, how you interact. So this is something I said to people in the lab that they need to learn how to use this extremely powerful tool for the future.
And so on that point, final question to you both today. What advice would you give to early career scientists on how to best collaborate with AI and the tools like co-scientists to try to enhance their research?
Use it, try it, and learn from it. Okay, and be critical. One important aspect of his scientist or be a researcher is to be critical with everything. Okay, always question everything. If nothing else, co-scientists will help in developing this skill because it will provide more than one hypothesis. So you have to be critical in analyzing those different hypotheses.
Yeah, I will agree. So I think the first reaction you might have is that maybe your life can be more complicated, or I think it's they need to understand how to use the system. So it's something that they need to incorporate in the same way that we have been incorporating different tools over the past years, AlphaFold or sequencing, so this is an extremely powerful tool that they need to know how to use for the research.
Well, it's certainly very exciting, and it'll be very fascinating to see just how much this tool is utilized and implemented in the future. Our thanks to you both today for your time today and for sharing your research with us.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so we all need a co-scientist, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I mean, it just I think what blew my mind was how blown away they were by it.
Right. It's like they were surprised by their own results.
Yeah, and its ability to just get to the same hypothesis.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's amazing that the hypotheses that the AI research assistant comes up with are better than the human ones.
Mm-hmm.
And I also thought it was amazing what he said. It's because they come without bias.
Yep.
And we've been sort of told that AI brings bias, and that's one of the problems with AI. But what he's saying is that no, that it has the ability to perhaps think clearly because it doesn't bring the bias to it, which I just think was amazing.
Yeah. And I think that also has implications which we touched upon for just the greater field of science and how science is done. You touched upon peer review, but biases also come in when everyone in a particular field is gunning behind a particular hypothesis. I mean, we had that in Alzheimer's relatively recently with, the amyloid hypothesis, billions towards that, and it didn't really amount to much. Yeah, right? So everyone kind of gets back behind the big guns in science, but...
Right. But the other thing that they said, which was absolutely fascinating to me, was that the co-scientist has access to every single paper that's ever been written.
Right, yeah, which is insane.
And still formulated the correct
And
hypothesis.
It can find a little bit from one of them that kind of says, oh, what about this? But there's no human could ever do.
Exactly. And I think that's the main thing for me.
But you brought up a great point because, again, we keep going back to, AI will not overtake the human experience and human interaction. And you brought up, I think, a good point of, will we still always need that human component to at least come up with the question? Well, our thanks to them. That was certainly fascinating. That does it for today's show. If you liked today's content, don't forget to like and subscribe, as this certainly helps us to improve the show for you. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for joining us here today, guys, in person. Such a pleasure to have you.
Was awesome.
Thank you, Audrey. It's been such an interesting discussion.
Agents of Tech is brought to you by Web's Edge, and we would like to thank our studio engineer, Dan Enriquez, and our team here in Washington, as well as our editor, Abby Harries, and our producer, Kath Sheehan.